Hello everyone, welcome back to Collecting Nolan. This is Russ, and you're watching the second episode of Sensational Set Sunday. Today we'll be talking about pre-war cards. Now I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking Russ lost his mind. Nolan did not play in pre-war times. Nolan played from 1966 to 1993. And you're right, but there is a set that kind of marries pre-war era with modern day cards. So today we're going to talk about the 1993 Charles Conlon collection. So Charles Conlon was born November 28th, 1868 in Albany, New York, and he was a proofreader for the New York Evening Telegram. But he used photography as a hobby, mostly landscape photography. But when one of the sporting newspapers at the time that would later become the Sporting News, they asked him to get some photos of some of the baseball players for their magazine. So he set out with his very old camera, like they had back in like 1904, and he went out and took many photos. Probably the most iconic of his photos is the one with Ty Cobb sliding into third base. That's gained the most popularity, but he shot over. It's rumored to be over 80,000 photos during his career, and most of which had to have been destroyed because when he was living in his house, these old photographs were printed on glass and they took up a lot of space. So unfortunately, he had to destroy a lot of those glass, I guess negatives is what they would probably be equivalent to today, because they just took up too much space in his house, unfortunately. So with that being said, let's take a look at some of the cards from the 1993 set. So the 1993 set had 330 cards in total. Nolan was on about 9 of those cards, give or take. He's actually on a couple variations of one card, which we'll see. So let's go ahead and get started looking at those. So for the Conlon collection, I feel like it's like a hybrid between, pre-war cards and, modern day cards, because it shows pictures of Nolan Ryan and compares them to 8 Hall of Famers. And the first card in the set that includes Nolan anyway, I shouldn't say the first card because that's not true either, but this has Dizzy Dean and Nolan Ryan in it, and talks about Dizzy Dean being different than Nolan in that Dizzy Dean was a self-promoter. He was able to win 30 games in a season, but his career ended prematurely when, like in 1927, he got hit in the foot by a line drive that hurt his foot, and then he tried pitching through it, and he ruined his arm by doing that, so he had to retire. But then he became a broadcaster. So this card basically just talks about his personality as being a self-promoter, while Nolan was always a pretty quiet guy and did things his own way. But these are very nice photos of these old-time players, and on the right here is Nolan Ryan, and I think like a 1971 photo of him. And this is card number 928. For the second card, there's Nolan and Dazzy Vance. And it says hard-throwing farm boys, which is exactly what they were. They both grew up on farms. There's Nolan's probably around 1968 photo, I guess. It looks like the same photo from the Pacific cards, though. And there's a picture of Dazzy Vance there. So Dazzy was basically the Nolan Ryan of the 20s, where he was also, this card tells us that, he had control problems in his early career, but once he got that taken care of, he was pretty dominant. He struck out like 264 batters in a season. He led the league in strikeouts 7 times. And in that season of 264, the closest guy to him was Walter Johnson, who only had 158. So when you're beating out Walter Johnson in strikeouts, you're doing something right. So this is card number 929, Dazzy Vance. The next card is Lefty Grove, Nolan, and this card talks about flawless mechanics. And I like these cards because it gives you a lot of information on the back. It talks about both players. But this card basically mentions how Lefty Grove was the first power pitcher in baseball, where he used his legs to help him develop all of his power for throwing. He won 300 games in his career as well. But he also was in the minor leagues for a pretty long time. And so this card says if he wouldn't have been in the minors so long, he probably would have won 400 games. And that's along the lines of Ty Cobb. Ty Cobb. Cy Young. Sorry about that. So, if you're being compared to the likes of, Cy Young and Nolan Ryan, then you obviously are doing something right. So that's this one. And this is number 930. The next card has Rube, Waddell, and Nolan on it, strikeout leaders. And if you guys ever want to hear interesting stories about a baseball player, Rube Waddell is your guy. If you just Google him, there's stories that pop up. And I Googled him a while ago, and I can't remember some of the stories, but I just remembered that he was a pretty interesting character in baseball. But Rube's career wasn't all that long. He struck out 900 players in 3 years, and he led the league in strikeouts for 7 years. But then, his career kind of just ended. So he didn't have the longevity of Nolan, but they just compared it. Like if he did, he probably would have been up there among the strikeout leaders. So this is card number 931. Next card is Nolan and Grover Alexander. There's a picture of Nolan from the Astros and Grover Alexander, of course. So Grover Alexander was known as Old Low and Away. So what he liked to do was he had a sinking curveball that would be mostly on the outside corner of the plate, and it would be low. And that would set players up with his, he would then set them up for a curveball that was basically kind of lights out for many batters. So he was a 300 game winner. Whereas Nolan was a different kind of pitcher. His fastball was more of a rising fastball that came up into the zone. And then he would buckle your knees with this curveball because it went sinking curve, basically a 12-6 trajectory. So they just compared the two different fastballs and essentially, I guess, like two different curveballs too. But that's number 932. Next card is Nolan and Bob Feller, and I think everyone knows who Bob Feller is. But basically, Bob Feller is compared to being the Nolan Ryan of the Joe DiMaggio era. He set a lot of records that Nolan would later break. He was known to be the fastest pitcher of the time. They used some pretty archaic methods to clock him, so I don't know how fast or hard he threw. I think it's probably rumored to be around 98, but who knows if that's accurate. That's card number 933 with Bob Feller. And then this next card is probably one of my favorites. And that's when it has Walter Johnson and Nolan, and it says the big train meets the Ryan Express. And I really like this card because as a kid, I remember seeing this card. I'm like, how in the world did they do that? Because, this was way before Adobe Photoshop and all that stuff. And I thought that was just the coolest thing. It's like they had Walter Johnson, who was long gone by then, and Nolan Ryan meeting in the dugout, it looks like, shaking hands. And I just thought that is a pretty cool baseball card. But of course, everyone knows Walter Johnson. He was, the strikeout leader until Nolan surpassed him. But he was also rumored to be one of the hardest throwing pitchers of all time. He had mostly like a slinging sidearm motion. He didn't use his legs a lot, but he just kind of like whipped the ball. So, who knows how hard he threw as well. But he had a lot of strikeouts, and he was pretty successful. But this card basically also compares the two players. They both had the similar amount of games and a similar amount of innings pitched. So Walter Johnson, of course, had more wins than Nolan. But this card just talks about how they were kind of similar in that how Nolan was breaking records that Walter Johnson had set. So there's that card. And then this card is Nolan Ryan and Ted Lyons. They stand for characters. So Ted Lyons was a pitcher who didn't really have an awesome fastball, but he did like blow out his arm in his 30s. And after that, he had to find a way to pitch, so he developed a knuckleball, and he pitched until he was 45, but he led the league in ERA in his 40s. So he was a pretty successful guy. But this just talks about how he was known for his courage and sportsmanship, and Nolan's kind of the same way. So that's card number 935. So then there's also this card, which is just a color version of that black and white card talking about Nolan Ryan, Walter Johnson. This is number 30 in the set, unlike the other one that was like 934. This is number 30. This is my favorite card just simply because it's color. So the Conlon collection also has like 8x10 proofs of some of these photos that they use for these cards. And you could purchase those in some capacity. I'm not sure like how prevalent they were in the 90s, but I also have that packet. I just didn't bring it down because I didn't want to open it because it's still factory sealed, but it basically just has an 8x10 of this photo in there. So to me, that's pretty awesome. And then there's also the same picture with the, there's a gold border around this one. So different card, but kind of the same. But you can see that gold there. And this one's number is 934G. And same back as the other two cards, but just has the different number there. I like the gold border. I think it's pretty cool. And then finally is just another version of this one, where on the back it says for promotional use only, but again also has a different number as the color. It's number 934, where the other colored one was number 30 in the set. So basically the same back, but with that promotional use only verbiage on there. Yeah, but that's it for the Conlon collection of Nolan Ryan cards. So that's the Conlon collection. What do you guys think of the Conlon collection? Do you like it? Do you hate it? I kind of like it because it brings back history to me. I like seeing those old photos of Walter Johnson and Dizzy Dean and those other guys, and reading some things about them, because baseball history, and it's just, I don't know. I always liked looking at those kind of cards, especially like Cracker Jack, Shoeless Joe Jackson, that you'll never get. But as a kid, you always thought, wow, that's a really cool card. And, Shoeless Joe Jackson, that's a cool name. So I just think it combines modern cards with Nolan being on them, and, seeing those old guys on there as well. So tell me what you think. What was your favorite Nolan card out of that little set there? And just let me know what you think. I'll talk to you later. See you at the next one. Thank you.